You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space. And in this edition, we are going to be previewing Season 2, Episode 8, or if you like, Series 15, Episode 8, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Hello, Steve.
Matt,
He's lost without the and, isn't he now? Matt is...
the alphabet getting to
What a
you again
step
there,
the
Matt.
magic.
No, I just wanted to build up the tension.
Worked.
Okay. Right. So before we get started on anything, I've got a quick question. We've had Susan, we've had Rani, we've had Omega. Those are three of the four big fan it's gonna be's. So are we gonna get Romana in this episode?
Yeah, it's the last time lady who needs to come back. What the hell?
Do you know what though? That struck me as a frivolous thought earlier in the week. But having struck me as a frivolous thought earlier in the week, it then made me carry on and think, well, actually, because Russell T Davies every season he likes to bring something back. And if not one thing, occasionally two. So the first time it was the Daleks, obviously. Second time the Cybermen, third time the Master. And then in the fourth season, you didn't just get Davros, but you also had the Sontarans, right? So you had five big returnees across
You,
those.
you forgot the Autons in the very first episode.
Yeah, I don't. that wasn't a big return, though, was it? So these are the ones where the character becomes a thing that's going to
Okay.
happen. That's
All
what
right.
I'm really sort of talking about. And
Fair
then
enough.
last year we had a season where it didn't look like that sort of thing was going to happen, and then we had Sutek. And then this year it didn't necessarily look like that might necessarily happen. And then all in a flood, to coin a phrase, we had Susan and then the Rani, and now Omega. I wouldn't be surprised because Russell T Davies has a wry sense of humor if he didn't include Romana somewhere in the mix, just because he knows those are basically the big four, doesn't he?
Mhm.
The big four sort of Time Lords who could come back and who always get talked about. Let us, though, talk about what we think might happen in the next episode, what we think might not happen, and the things that have got us to this point to be here at this juncture. Because we're not going to have a chance to have a proper Doctor Who conversation about new Doctor Who for a while after this. So we might as well make the most of it while we've got it. There is one thing that's a spoiler as opposed to speculation, and we will not talk about that thing until right at the very end of the podcast, where we'll have a very short spoiler thing. But up until that point, what we will be concentrating on is only stuff that we've seen on screen, or I guess things that Russell T Davies has said in public. We won't be going into anything that we've heard behind the scenes. And there is only one thing anyway, and we'll bring it up right at the end just to include it in the conversation.
You've
So
got
this
me
is,
intrigued now. I don't know what that's going to be. I'm looking forward to that now.
oh, we've talked about it on WhatsApp. You've been around for the conversations.
Oh, right, that. Yeah. Okay.
So, but prior to that, everything that we talk about is just going to be speculation. So there's not going to be anything spoilerific about anything that we've heard. I want to get stuck in though with a question about. So I've been listening to, and I assume the three of you have been listening to a variety of podcasts this week reviewing Wish World and talking about, the series so far and what they think might happen as well, I guess. And the number of times I've heard the expression, I don't know what a first time viewer would think of this. And I'm thinking, this is episode 7, the first of a finale that is the end of a story that's been happening all series, if not for the last two series, of season 15 of a program that's been running since 1963 that has had episodes in the last decade and a half getting 13, 12, 13, 11, 12, 13 million viewers. How many people are actually sitting down and thinking, oh, Wish World, episode 7 of series 2 stroke 15. I'll make that my first episode of Doctor Who. We are going to record a conversation about who is Doctor Who for, and that is going to, in some part, be about is Doctor Who for fans or for casual viewers anymore. But the is a casual viewer going to be able to come on board with this episode conversation is surely not one that you have in the first part of the season finale. Nobody starts at the season finale. So, I mean, you might have three people watching Wishworld for the first time ever, their first ever Doctor Who, but I can't imagine it's any more than about three people. So let's just take it as read that Russell T Davies isn't being an egregious idiot in making sort of fan wanky, continuity heavy season finales when that's what television does.
It's a new sort of fan anxiety, and I'm
Mm,
pretty sure it comes from our generation
yes.
pretty much, who who had legitimate problems, I think, in the 1980s because JNT was relying on the past and relying on the heritage of Doctor Who rather than potentially generating new stories. And he kind of fixed it with, I mean, this was a Eric Saywood
Yeah,
came in
well,
with
yeah.
JNT because Cartmel sort of fixed it. But I think this is an anxiety that still kind of exists within us as a body of fans. But I don't think young kids or the actual, young
Well,
people,
this is it.
I think
Yeah.
they get it. I think
Plus,
I
when I was doing the You and Who books, right, the number of people who wrote about, oh, the first story I saw was like the Five Doctors, and I wanted to know more.
yeah,
Or the first story I saw was like Legopolis, and I wanted to know more.
yeah.
It's not a problem. People, if they're interested, they don't mind the continuity. They understand that they've come in at the end of the story, and they'll go back and find out what the story was about.
And it strikes me that it's something potentially that RTD regrets from his original run that he
Yeah.
didn't milk the past of Doctor Who more, because he sees Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall doing it a little bit more and being a little bit freer. Well, I mean, RTD starts by trying to divorce this series from the original series as much as possible, albeit with Autons and Daleks. He's kind of rebooting it, reintroducing it. But now it feels like it's almost an attempt to promote the library that's on Disney slash iPlayer to draw people in. And the colorized Daleks, colorized war games, the repeat of Pyramids of Mars. These are all sort of parts of that kind of promotion, I think.
Right, Matt, at the
Yeah.
risk of going down a huge rabbit hole into an episode that we're going to record in a couple of weeks, shall we get back to the
Okay.
multitude of talking points about this episode that I've got? It's going to have a running time of 66 minutes. Did we all know that? So it's
Yeah,
about
which is an odd split, isn't it? Was it first 44, second 66?
It's very
yeah, but
short, the first one, wasn't it? Yeah.
Russell
Yeah.
T Davies very often does this, though. If you look at Stolen Earth and Journey's End, that's 44 and 66. He does it all the time. I think the first one he did it with was Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords, where it was an extra 10, and thereafter it was an extra 15 or 20. Because your cliffhanger point is going to be in the first half of the story, not halfway through the story, isn't it? And
It's not
plus,
necessarily up to him, is it, anyway? I mean,
well, that's
you
what I
could
was going to
get
say.
told. Yeah.
You might be able to say to the BBC, can I have an extra 20 minutes one week? But they're not going to say, yeah, you can have an extra 10 minutes this week and an
Mm.
extra 10 minutes next. They'd rather you had your whole 20 on the one night,
Yeah,
wouldn't they?
yeah.
Yeah. Plus, it's been delivered far enough advance. I don't think can I have an extra 20 minutes is going to be a problem. This is roughly
Oh,
how
no,
long the
yeah.
episode's going to be. Schedules can work around that, no problem.
They might only be signing off on this episode in the last couple of weeks, but they will have known it was going to be 66 minutes for some months. It's the effects, the grading, the music, the sound that they've been editing since then. There's a synopsis. I'll quickly read the synopsis out. It doesn't give away much, but there is one thing in there that's possibly worth thinking about as we have the rest of the conversation. Battle rages. Oh no, shall I do it in internet voice? Battle rages across the sky. No, I shan't. Battle rages across the skies as the unholy trinity unleash their deadly ambition. Who writes these things? The Doctor, Belinda, and Ruby have to risk everything in the quest to save one innocent life.
Russell T Davis writes them, as we found out. But no,
Does
he
he?
confirmed it in an interview on
Yeah, yeah.
Pilot TV or Empire or something.
Well, JNT always used to fess up to having written the ones in the 1980s, didn't he? So it's no surprise. The unholy trinity unleashed their deadly ambition.
That's nice.
I mean, you would say who writes this stuff, but
I mean, I guess that's got a degree of ambiguity because the thing we don't know, for me, the big thing about the next episode is, and forgive me if this treads on 4 of your 15 talking points, Jar,
no,
because
I
I've
don't
written
think it
notes.
will, because this is the general
Is
conversation.
Omega will Omega appear? Is he a kind of an object for quest that we never see? Is he dead and it's just a body to possess? So
There
it's
was
this ambition is kind of what's, or is he a giant crab?
well, there was on Twitter or X, somebody posted photos of apparently Omega from the next
Oh,
episode.
okay.
I didn't see them, and they very quickly got taken down. And people who did see them say they looked like fakes anyway.
Mm.
So there's every chance that they weren't real in any case.
Yeah.
Surely he's gonna inhabit the body of Conrad, isn't he? And Conrad will be going forward as a recurring villain. I would have thought, assuming there's more episodes.
I'm not
As
sure. That's
Omega.
not. Well, that's not what the pictures showed.
Okay.
So,
But if
but I
they're
mean,
fakes, that's neither
they
here nor there,
probably
is
are
it?
fakes. The thing. So somebody said it looked more like a crab, and somebody else said the description they gave made it sound more like Thanos. To be honest,
Hmm.
and I would suspect that Thanos actually would be something that Russell T Davies might do in a sort of post-Marvel world. But like you say, they're probably fakes. I Okay, let's do Omega. So, if they're going to get anybody to play Omega, I think they should get Peter Davison. We said this as soon as we pressed stop last week. The very next thing we said was, "Will Peter Davison be back as Omega then?" And
There's
again,
not enough Rice Krispies in the world.
oh no, but Peter Davison has said he'd like to come back to Doctor Who as a villain.
As a villain, yeah.
And wouldn't that just be perfect? And Peter Davison is so different now from when he left before, when he was what, 30 when he left? So I mean, he's much more than double that now. I think he'd make, especially if it was maybe just a voice performance, I think he'd make a great Omega, actually. Peter Davison's voice now is amazing. So I don't know. And I also think that Russell T Davies would have thought of that. And I also think that it would appeal to Russell T Davies's sense of humor to do that. So I'm sort of 50-50 over whether I actually expect that. But I certainly think it's not impossible. Don't know.
It'd be nice to see him play real villain because
Yeah.
he hasn't done that in any role I can think of in the recent times. He's always
Yeah,
been
no.
a mild bank manager, slightly befuddled.
Have you ever seen
Right.
Surviving Peacocks? So it's a
Yes.
TV
Harnessing
movie.
Peacocks.
Harnessing Peacocks, sorry. Where he plays, the character he plays in that's a cock. But I
Yes.
don't know if you could exactly call him a
No,
villain.
so he's played like cads,
Yeah,
but he
yeah.
hasn't played kind of super villains, which it would be interesting to see.
Should we stay with Omega then? So another, so I've got to bring this up. Another point of conversation that I heard elsewhere this week, and I'm not going to name names for fear of outing stupidity, was, oh, why did the Rani call Omega the first Time Lord? Surely that's Tecteun, or name your other Time Lord or whatever. No, Time Lords became Time Lords when they had the ability to travel in time. It's there in the name. So the ability to regenerate isn't what made the Time Lords Time Lords. It was the ability to travel in time. And Omega is the one who gave them the ability to travel in time. So Omega was the founder of Time Lord Society. So just to get that straight, the first Time
You,
Lord.
you can say the first Gallifreyan.
Yeah, that would be a
This has
different thing.
upset you, JR, hasn't it? This has upset you.
Oh, you listen to what people say sometimes and just think, seriously? Can you
need to
actually
be-
hear the words coming out of your mouth?
It sounds.
You need to be more selective with which podcast you're listening to, clearly.
at some point it feels like people have just taken against RTD and lost faith in RTD, and they're looking
And
for
Chris
sort of
Chibnall.
anything to be cross about.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So I've seen
Totally,
reviews
yeah.
about the return of the Rani, the return of Omega being too much, and the series is going down the pan. But you know,
Well, this kind of
it's one of these times I actually think that everything's been put together neatly like Lego,
yeah,
that
yeah.
everything connects. There's the pantheon makes sense suddenly and is quite exciting. So yeah,
Well, and we'll as we go through this list, we'll go through the ways in which these things connect. But yeah, I absolutely agree. And look, 63 years or whatever we are now, 63, 62 years into Doctor Who, normal
62.
telly. Sorry, 62, yeah. Normal telly uses its history, uses its continuity all the time. We discussed this before, didn't we? For reasons that I'm not going into now. But to have Omega back when he's so you've had the story of the last of the Time Lords, and we've been following the journey of the last of the Time Lords, and they've used that expression too a couple of times in sort of this series and the last to remind us of the fact that he's the last of the Time Lords, bringing in the first of the Time Lords as well. Surely that's just sensible at this point. So but also, I mean, one last point about Omega before we move on, and we'll probably come back to him anyway. The mask, are we expecting to see something replicating that first mask? That wouldn't surprise me either, frankly.
Who
Well,
knows?
yes, because the other option is Omega's got no physical form
Well,
because he has no physical.
or he inhabits somebody else's body, as we say.
Or
I
has a new
rather,
mask.
well, yeah, I rather like the idea that he might be inhabiting Conrad. Actually, I think that's quite an appealing theory that I heard.
But I
That,
think the thing about Conrad is he's with the other god. So he's
oh,
in the room
the
with
giggly
the.
baby, yeah.
Yeah, so I can't see it being
my
Conrad.
my instinct is a mask is would be quite attractive for Russell T Davies because then you can recruit a big voice actor name, not spoil anything, have them record all of their dialogue in Soho somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
So don't bring them to Cardiff, and suddenly you've got a surprise kind of Ian McKellen attached to it, or whoever you want,
Omega's
Peter Davison.
alive!
or Brian Blessed, if you want to
And you don't have to worry
piss in
about how.
someone's swimming pool or
And
something.
you also don't have to worry about how old they are because they don't have to walk around wearing the mask
No,
in
yeah,
the big suit.
yeah.
And
You
not the
could
first
even
time Blessed played Omega either, if it was.
No,
you
indeed
could
not.
you could even get Tom Baker to do it. That's
Um, the Ra-
Ooh,
Oh, God.
no, maybe not. Maybe not.
the Rani. I mean, we talked a lot in the last episode about the Rani and how actually. So everybody's been saying, "Oh, the Rani, she's just Missy again, or just the Master." I don't know why he's done that, but everything about this story screams to me that this is not a Master story and that this
No.
is a Rani story. So I don't know whether there's anything more to be said other than what we did say.
Well, the thing is, it's the Rani just basically the Doctor's part of her plot is done. She's a scientist. It's right. That's it. Don't need you anymore. And you'd be a detriment for you on. Off you go.
Well, this
Yeah.
is this
Perfect
is
sense.
it. This was my understanding, and it's not spelled out, but this was how I understood it. And I don't think we did mention this last week, or not in so many words, but she needs doubt in order to open up this underverse, whatever. How
Yeah.
does that work? And why does she need the doctor? Well, she needs the doctor because he's a Time Lord. So, whatever doubt she's already amassed from humankind, he squares it or whatever just by being there or just by funneling it through him. Why doubt to open up the underverse? And this was the way I saw it. If you've got two universes, and let's be honest, what we're all expecting is some kind of notion of the matter universe and the antimatter universe, right? Because it's Omega. If you've got these two universes existing next to each other, and what the story has been about this entire time is about belief in things that aren't necessarily real. So the whole thing about the incel storylines is they believe in stuff that's essentially a falsehood. Part of the reason they circulate conspiracy theories and stuff is to cast doubt in the norms so that people will start believing in the unnorms, the disnorms, whatever you want to call it, and they will come around to reform, Trump, whatever. And then you have this concept of these two worlds, these two universes existing next to each other. How do you bring those together? Because, and this is not a scientific thing, but this is a sort of analogical thing. What holds the two universes apart is the belief of the people in our universe that ours is the only universe. So, how do you bring the two universes together? By casting doubt among the people in our universe that it is the only universe, at which point the other universe can seep in. And that was the understanding I took away from the last episode of why she needed doubt, because doubt breaks down the walls of reality, because reality no longer is reality if you don't believe in it anymore.
And there's a more general thing that when you bring gods into the story, which
Hmm,
Doctor Who has, then obviously doubt and faith are the two opposites. So each of those have a power. Gods exist because of faith. Doubt destroys religion, moves on from religion. So doubt has a power that is equal and opposite. It is the antimatter equivalent to
oh,
faith.
yes,
So I think it's just been I just like the idea of using doubt as this kind of conceptual power to chip away at things. It's much more interesting than a lot of what Doctor Who's done for quite a long time.
for sure. It's like he took the idea behind Curse of Fenric
Mm.
and then said, how do we use that in the modern world? And how do we use that in modern politics and make it relevant and real? I
Mm,
think he's done a really good job
mm.
of giving this episode and looking back more of the series than you think in the last couple of years. Way more substance than Doctor Who usually has.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it
It's
is the sort of it is potentially because we haven't seen the final, but Wish World potentially reshapes the two series and the three specials into something better than they seemed at the time.
For sure.
So it's he's doing a really good job at reframing RTD2 as a coherent, thematically consistent, unified entity, potentially, rather than just a random, late middle-aged guy doing the things he wasn't allowed to do the first time round with more money. It's actually he's doing something a bit more interesting this time round.
For sure. Right, let's skip through a few of these things on the list
Okay.
because otherwise this conversation is going to go on forever before we even get to the list. Yeah, Conrad. I don't know. I'm going to bring up some characters' names and just have we any thoughts about what might happen to them? Because obviously it's a Russell T Davies finale. We don't know. I I think Conrad, the fact that he's in that room looking after that baby, and that baby is one who was born a human and was then subsequently possessed by a god, right? That was the understanding I took. And so I'm kind of assuming that baby goes back to being just a baby if the god disinhabits the body. But anyway, I suspect that if we see much more of Conrad this week, it's going to be wrapped up in what happens to the baby.
I think if Conrad isn't possessed by Omega, I think Conrad's actually being framed as a slightly sympathetic character, an arsehole, but a kind of an arsehole who's been used by higher powers.
Are
So
there, but
it's kind of
yeah.
he sort of feels like he's at the beginning of a redemption. So him and Mrs. Flood, I don't know what her
Well,
marital status is. But they both feel like the kind of the points of weakness in the unholy trinity as they embark on their deadly whatever it is.
well, yeah. Well, and yeah, and there's a real world corollary for that as well, because obviously people who become sort of radicalized aren't radicalized because they're bad people, but they're radicalized because they've sort of fallen into taking in, believing the wrong kind of stuff, and you can therefore turn them back. Do you remember that Kate Winslet film about the deprogramming? Do you remember? She played somebody who'd been radicalized, and she goes to, I think, Saharan Africa to a
Holy
derad.
smoke,
Is it Holy Smoke? Yeah.
something like that.
Is that where she met what's his face? I think it might be. the guy she married, the director, Sam
Mendes.
Mendes. Yeah, yeah. I think that might be where she met Sam Mendes. But anyway, that's a thing. And it's obviously newsworthy as well because of Jemima Begum. So it could be that Conrad becomes a sort of avatar for that kind of a storyline.
I think he's moving slightly towards that, but there's the flip side that not all people who are radicalized have done it because they've been fooled into something.
Oh no, but
They
some,
do it
yeah, yeah.
because it's financially very. I mean, Andrew Tate
Well,
is about to be charged with 21 crimes, and you've got Lawrence Fox, and you get the feeling that they're radical because it's, potentially lucrative for them, whether or not they believe in their radicalization. And so Conrad, the question is whether he's one or the other, whether he's the
well, this
victim
is
or the inspiration. I think in Lucky Day, he was obviously the spearhead, but now he's been sort of,
yeah,
taken
yeah.
over by Durrani and Mrs. Flood and ultimately Omega.
Well,
I
and we
mean,
talked
maybe
about,
That's
maybe the
yeah.
whole
but that's where
Trinity
your
is going to
doubt has
be
to creep
invented.
in.
Sorry?
She needs his belief. His belief is powering that world in part
Yeah,
to being in it. So is that where your doubt creeps in on that last one? Is that
possibly. I think
possibly
that
is that
world
a
is
fit?
done next week. I think Wish World is
Yeah.
over.
Oh
So,
no, there's lots of Wish World in the trailers, isn't there?
well, I think the physical fragments of Wish World, but the
Well, maybe,
idea of
yeah.
it being a kind of trap
Yeah,
for the credulous, or this 1950s thing. I think that's you know I think they're left with the kind of the material of Wish World, but not the
It
beliefs.
might be four different rooms, JR.
yeah, because we're at the juncture in the story, aren't we? Where the thing that they wanted Wishworld for was to get Omega to break down the barriers between this universe and the other. And that's happened, and so Wishworld now becomes something that they don't need anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of these things could become relevant.
And then the Instagram post, he's mentioned that Unit Tower's in it, so I presume the real world does break through at some point.
Well, what we've watched is the real world disappearing downwards, haven't we? But it's not been
Yeah.
shattering. It's just been sort of going down. So I wouldn't be surprised if next episode takes place in the same physical geographical locations, but that they are now part of the antimatter universe in some way. Or maybe they're sort of bubbled in the antimatter universe, and there's another wall of reality next week between, well, as we saw in the Three Doctors, the real world stuff that's at the heart of the sort of nexus and the other universe that's around it. And you need something like the recorder to break us out. And that takes us back, doesn't it, to so okay, this is speculation, but this is speculation about how the story might end. And so I still think you're going to get a moment of Mrs. Flood betraying the Rani because that's just built into those characters, isn't it? But it says in the blurb that Russell T Davis wrote, the Doctor, Belinda, and Ruby have to risk everything in the quest to save one innocent life. And the big thing that the Doctor was bringing up as the episode was ending last week was that the baby is real. Right. So the way I understood the episode is not that these were sort of avatars of the real people in Wish World, but that it was the actual people. And a certain level of brainwashing essentially is taking place through the sort of the god baby, the wish baby, the wish god is kind of brainwashing people into believing in the reality around them, while it's not necessarily true. But those are still the real people. So when the doctor says the baby's real, you think, what does that mean? Because everybody's real, right? I think the point of having Poppy there is that everybody else on the planet Earth, in Wish World version of planet Earth, is there because they're on the normal version of planet Earth. But Poppy is the one element that's not from normal planet Earth. She's been fetched from the future, from outer space, presumably by Mrs. Flood in Space Babies we didn't see, or at some point since Space Babies, but at some point Mrs. Flood has been and collected that baby, right? Presumably. Or maybe somebody else has, but that baby's been collected. She shouldn't be in Wish World. And so when the doctor says she's real, I think what he means is she's not infected by Wishworld. We even got that bit where they say she's cheeky because she was saying things that they weren't expecting of her. She wasn't behaving like a normal baby. I think that's all because she's not from Wishworld. I think she is basically the recorder from Three Doctors made into a human being for Russell T Davis's version. I don't know. What do you think?
She was making
I,
cups fall through tables, wasn't she?
which is
she was doing all
dangerous.
sorts.
Mm, mm. So that's just
It goes back to that Space Babies line I was saying about. It implies the Doctors had some kind of power there. I wish, we're not your parents, but I wish we could be. So is that
yeah.
going to play in? Is that playing into this now? Is that
E-
wish that far back, indicating this plan's been there longer than we think?
Yeah, it could
Even
just
even
be
if
foreshadowing. Yeah.
even if it turns out that Space Babies was the key to the whole two series, it still don't make it a good episode though. It was still bloody awful.
Yeah, despite the fact that Russell T Davies has made much more substantial Doctor Who than A, he normally does, and B, we thought he was doing, that
Mm.
still doesn't mean that tonally and in other areas like that,
So
so yeah. But I still think it is still way better, I think, than I'd kind of been expecting. And this second series has been way better than the first series,
oh
right?
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Rogue. So Rogue was in the last episode. I thought, was it revealed on? So I've heard this from a couple of people, but I didn't watch Unleashed. But it has been being said that he just recorded a couple of lines at the end of the recording of the episode Rogue because Russell T Davies obviously knew what was coming up.
Yeah.
And so that was recorded then, and so that's presumably all there is. There may be another scene, a sort of tag scene, but he's not going to have any
I
more of a
think it was
substantial role.
Shooty. It was Shooty that said that, wasn't
Oh,
it?
did he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
It was on
in
Unleashed on the
Unleashed.
green
Yeah,
screen.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they
Fair enough.
showed the rehearsal because Shooty, Varda, everyone didn't know it was going to be there.
Mm.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and then they because they'd already recorded it, they were able to play it in, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it may be that there's another scene in the next episode with Rogue as well to show that A, he survived, or B, he's moved on somewhere or something, but it's not going to be anything
He's
more. He's
yeah,
not going to be in the story.
a shot of him on Broadway in New York, having escaped the Netherverse, and
Yeah,
Walking onto
possibly.
42nd Street.
yeah,
Um, Obviously Susan is a factor. We are expecting to see her, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it'd be
Oh
nice
yeah.
to. So I'm in two minds. So it would be nice for her to actually stop being just a sitting down flashback, but
Yeah.
at the same time, Carol Ann Ford, there are two issues. One is her age,
Oh well,
and one is her acting ability.
well
She's quite
Steve.
lively. She is
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
lively.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Steve
yeah,
and I have both seen her in the flesh in the last few months at
yeah, yeah,
one
yeah.
place
Mm.
or another.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
she's still
So she's
she's
mobile.
she's
Oh
She's not a
very
yeah.
much so,
Oh
very
she's
yeah.
not
much
a
Oh
so,
yeah.
runner,
yeah.
Yeah.
but she could stand.
She can stand. Yeah.
I
Okay,
know
okay.
she's
I would still expect to be regenerated, maybe, or certainly by the end of the episode. Then you can make her a more active part of the mythology without
Hmm.
kind of hinging everything on an 80-plus-year-old actor.
Yeah.
maybe. I'm not entirely sure. So this is something that I could see Russell T Davies doing as well, frankly, especially given that Stephen Moffat laid hints about this in Hell Bent. But I could see Russell Davies doubling down on the half human on my mother's side thing and making Susan a Gallifreyan who's also, got 50% human or whatever, but can't regenerate, just becomes a. So I potentially you could have a funny moment where there's some hint in the dialogue that doesn't spell it out, but hints towards the half human on my mother's side thing, and then Susan actually dies. And so her story is rounded out by the character dying rather than regenerating.
I don't
And then
think
you get
Russell
a
does that sort of thing, to be honest. I don't think he likes doing that sort of thing.
Well, he was. No, I don't know. I think he does. He was going to do that in The Doctor's Daughter, till Stephen Moffat said, no, let her live, let her regenerate at the end. So,
Yeah, but that's a one-off character, not
Yeah, it
a
is.
piece of Doctor Who history.
oh yes, but I think so if I was the showrunner, this would what would be going through my mind. and then you act on it or you don't act on it, that character is indelibly linked with that actor on the screen. She was the first companion. And it wasn't just that Susan was the first companion, it was that Carol Ann Ford was the first companion. Carol Ann Ford is well into her 80s now. She's not going to do any more Doctor Who after this.
No.
So why not round out the character and the actress by giving that character and that actress a final sentimental, befitting, emotional ending?
And also, RTD is so pissed off with Steph Coleman that he'll gradually kill off every character. We'll have flashbacks to Carl and Zar, and they'll be killed off in it, and there'll be some reference to William Russell probably.
Well, no, we haven't had
What's this
a.
apocalypse on the Stone Age?
Yeah. He's just
We
so
haven't.
pissed.
We haven't had this episode as dedicated to the memory of William Russell, have we? Which I thought we
Yes,
might
Rogue.
do.
Rogue
Did we?
was, wasn't it?
Was it? Oh well, perhaps I've just forgotten. Fair
You're
enough.
such a bad fan.
What a but what a shame to dedicate that particular episode to him.
I like that episode. This might just be a generation thing that Doctor Who's made for me more than you.
Who knows?
Does
Cheeky
it?
get.
I'm assuming there'll be no explanation of how Susan is there necessarily, rather than on sort of early 23rd century Earth. And we wouldn't want one, would we? We wouldn't.
Nah,
We
we don't
wouldn't
need
need.
them. We
No,
don't need them.
exactly. I'm sure there's some people who will insist on knowing,
Oh
but
yes. Yes.
Nicola Bryant hasn't been back yet.
Well, there are some sort of small benefits of
She's
things.
genuinely good. She's a really good
oh,
actress. Is she not a good actress? I think she's better. This is a tangent. She's a better actress than Sophie Aldred. I prefer Ace. I prefer Ace as a character, and actually, I think Sophie Aldred did much better in Power of the Doctor than she did as Ace in the 1980s. But Nicola Bryant is a sort of,
Look, I know these people. I'm not going to start getting into
Please.
slagging off or
Okay.
defending any of them.
well, I don't think it's slagging Sophie Aldred off to say that
Oh,
Nicola
certainly
Bryant's a
not.
better actress.
Certainly.
Yeah. But I think Nicola Bryant, I think she is a decent actress. I don't think Doctor Who served her very well because they basically just asked her to do the same thing all the time with that stupid
Matt.
accent.
Like, you haven't had Matthew Waterhouse back either, but
well, that's fair enough.
There's no great outcry.
I mean, he's dead. And he's
Matt's
dead.
a good actor. Matt's a good actor.
may very well be, but he's dead and he's staying dead.
I mean, you could have them
going
back.
back to rescue him.
Unless a giant skeleton Adric to go with the giant skeleton dinosaurs that are roaming the earth. Just a gold badge on a.
Gold badge on a skeleton. Yeah, I'd watch.
Yeah.
A quick one off the list, a quick amusing one off the list. At the end of this
A
story,
quick one off what?
a quick amusing
list.
one off
List.
this
Oh, the
list.
list. The list. Okay, yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
blimey.
carry on.
I was just going to say I was just going to ponder how amusing it might be if indeed the baby who's been inhabited by the god. Oh, and that's something else that a lot of people didn't get. When the Rani's blowing at people and turning them into ducks or flowers or whatever, she's doing that after she kisses the baby. She's getting the power from the god and passing on the wish from the god. But a lot of people didn't get that. Anyway, I was going to say it would be amusing if at the end of the story, the at the end of the story, the god leaves the baby and leaves the doctor holding the baby, and the doctor says, "Oh, I must get you home, baby," and then spends the whole of series 3 with the baby as a companion as he struggles to get her home, just as he has been with Belinda this year.
It's like the Hangover. He's just got Poppy.
Not Poppy, the baby.
The baby in a
Poppy and the
papoose.
baby. Both of
Papoose
them.
as he's
Let's get
running
2
around.
kids.
Essentially, yeah. Poppy and the baby and the doctor. Wouldn't that be great?
It'd be like a TV comic, isn't it? John and Gillian is
Yeah.
the equivalent.
Basically, yeah. Ruby Sunday. So the 2 actual companions, Belinda Chandra, she's been brought in to replace Ruby because something's happened behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And she's not had a huge amount of character. I think she's been characterized thinly, but with enough texture that she feels like a person.
Yes.
I don't think she's been given with a huge amount to do, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem. Some people will say, "Oh, that's that's a slight on the actress to not give her much to do. I think if you ask the actress to come in and say, right, these are the scripts, we need a last minute replacement, we'd love to have you in, and do this last minute replacement thing, there won't be a huge amount for you to do, but you will go down as a Doctor Who companion, and it's 12 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months work this summer. Do you want to come and do it? And the actress says, yeah. Then fair enough. It's not a slight on the actress, as long as she
And
knows
a
what she's getting
lifetime of
into.
convention income.
Well, exactly. But do you know what I mean? It's people talk about this as if these people come into Doctor Who thinking that it's the highlight of their career and that they absolutely must have the best storylines that have ever been written and the best character beats that have ever been written, and they must meet the Dalek X number of times or else they won't be real, and all this kind of stuff. And it's a job for an actor. So I think Belinda Chandra is fine
Yeah, she's
as
made
a
the life
part.
between Andor and Doctor Who.
I
Well,
think
for sure.
would be nice if she survived into whatever third series there is, particularly if it's a bridge between two doctors, because
Yes.
I think with a new doctor, then she really sort of developed that character, and that character becomes slightly more, because otherwise you do have basically one season companions in a row.
Yeah, maybe. I
But then
think
that's what Russell did in the first time round, didn't he? Or it's what
yeah.
he attempted to, what he would have done if
Well,
things
it
hadn't
was
gone wrong with Christopher Eccleston, because
Yeah.
the
There's
plan was for Billy
always.
to leave at the end of that first season.
She was going to leave. Was it half? I thought it was halfway through season two. She was going to leave.
I think that was part of
She
one
was
plan
due
at
to
one
leave.
point.
Right. Sorry, Rise of Cybermen, Age of Steel, and then she
Okay.
changed her mind as well.
all
Right.
right.
But
She would have
yes,
been
there's always a cast change at the end of a
But I
Russell to
think
do
that
the
was plan
season.
two, wasn't it? I think that was plan
Yeah.
two. The original plan was to end at the end of the first season. But as Eccleston was going, they kept her on, planning to keep her on as far as the Cybermen. And then, as you say, she changed her mind and stayed a bit longer.
I think, although to go back to what Matt was saying, I think the converse of the Farada Sethu thing is that she's an actress who's going places.
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, she's just been in
Oh,
the Star
absolutely.
Wars,
Oh, so
so I
there's
can't
two
imagine.
different things. There's
Yeah, yeah,
her as an actress and her as a character.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think as a character, it'd be nice to see more her as an actress and Ncuti Gatwa as an actor. I think there's, you know, whether he leaves or not, he's clearly starting to sort of forge a Hollywood career.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
and
don't see
You'll
him
want to
coming
see
back
his
for the.
name. You'll want to see his name go up the poster.
Yeah, I don't see him coming back for the 70th anniversary special.
no, but then a lot of the actors who've been in modern Doctor Who haven't come back for anything,
Haven't
have
come
they?
back for it. No, 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 no.
So it's becoming one of those things, isn't it, where some will and some won't. But
That's right.
it's not something you can expect anymore because it's different, isn't it? In the originals run, you basically were casting people who didn't have a career before. And for some reason, hardly any of them went on to have much of a career afterwards. The companions, even the doctors, a lot of the time,
You
wouldn't
know,
go.
I'd query that in terms of well, Hartnell had a long career beforehand and was a film star, and Troughton had a long career afterwards. Well, and before.
Yes, but
I don't think that's entirely.
you've just
Pertwee
named.
had a different sort of career beforehand.
You
He
do
had the
understand I'm talking about the companions here, Steve.
oh yeah,
William
right,
Russell is
okay.
the one you're looking at, and
William
Louise
Russell, yeah,
Jameson is the one who has a
yeah,
really long and good career afterwards.
But
yeah.
basically, if you take all the doctors and all the companions in the classic run, probably the majority of them didn't have a particularly visible career before or afterwards necessarily. Whereas in
But
the modern run,
we could tot it up, but I don't know. I don't. I don't know. This is a generalization, isn't it? And there are people who've had good careers both before and after.
well, for sure, I'm just saying the balance in the modern run is
Oh yeah,
that they're higher profile
yeah,
actors
yeah,
than they were in the original
yeah,
run,
They chose.
is the
They
point I
chose.
was making.
They've
yeah.
cast differently in the modern run. In the modern run, they tend to have cast actors, with a few exceptions, at the beginning of their career or who have just become hot.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in the old series, they cast actors who generally have kind of faltered in their career or have reached a point in their career where they're stopping doing what they were doing before. So Arnold was a big film actor, but he wasn't in films when he got cast in Doctor Who.
He just done his sporting life.
Yeah, dude,
yeah,
wasn't
but
it?
But
Yeah,
he'd then done the army game, so
which
But I
was a
think
big
before that was
success.
58.
Yeah.
well, yeah. But
Yeah,
his
but
career, his
Johnny had
career was
returned to the army game actually because
Yeah.
he'd left the army game and then came back at the end of the run.
but I think Matt's point is basically that Hartnell was coming towards the end of his career, right?
He was only 55, was he? Something like that.
Yeah.
He
he
wasn't old
Born
then.
1908, yeah.
he
Mm.
evidently was coming towards the end of his career, looking
Yeah,
at his
yeah,
career after Doctor Who.
yeah, yeah.
And also 55 in 1963 is very different from 55 in 2023 or
Yeah,
whatever.
fair comment. Fair comment.
Anyway, let's
Yes.
Well,
so
55 in 2026 is basically David Tennant now, so
well,
that's the
exactly.
difference there.
Right. And Hartnell was around about well, almost exactly the same age as Peter Capaldi was when he was cast as the Doctor.
Well, that as John says, that's David Tennant pretty much is now.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And me.
Yeah, well, you're youngsters.
Young, vital, up
I
and comers.
should be 67 this autumn. So there you
Right.
see.
So a few more story things.
I'm
So
67, you know.
yes, I'm trying to move the conversation on.
Yes, do so, yeah.
Well, there's just a few more things on my list that are sort of story things that are kind of essentially just, I mean, with Russell T Davies, you never quite know because I don't think so. With Stephen Moffat, I think everything had a logic, but the logic was unpredictable because he gave you the questions and the answers in the wrong order, which made it hard to work out what was going to be important. With Russell T Davies, I don't think there's necessarily a logic. So sometimes it's really obvious what he's going to do, and sometimes not. So I think it's hard to predict what the story beats are going to be. So I'm going to bring some things up, but I don't necessarily expect us to have any answers to them, even if those answers are only opinions rather than expectations. But the bone kind, so these bone dinosaurs, a lot of people missed out the fact that the dinosaurs were obviously a metaphor for fascists too. People living in the past, right? The dinosaurs, the skeletons of dinosaurs are there to represent people living in the past. But do we expect to get an explanation of what they are, why they're there, and to have them perform a role in the story? I know they're in the next episode. Are we going to get more of an explanation? I think we might.
I think having seen the trailer, I think before I thought they were just a cool concept and you didn't need to explain them. I suspect Russell T Davies will explain them, but probably quite quickly. But looking at the trailer, I think they're going to be more of a part of next week than I thought they were.
Could it be that there's something that's bled through from the Underverse
Mhm.
in some way? The antimatter universe. It could be something
Would
like
be,
that.
but then I'd suggest because we've got the Bone Palace, that does more suggest they're a Rani thing or related to the Rani. Or maybe the
Yeah.
Bone Palace has an agent in the Underverse.
I was just thinking, I wonder if they are this story's equivalent of the Gel Guards or the
Hmm.
Ergon or
I
whatever
mean,
it was.
Yeah.
but potentially, I mean, this world is created by Conrad, generally out of his wishes, but presumably the Rani's got a few of her own wishes that she can use, and it does feel a very Rani thing to animate skeletons of giant dinosaurs
Well,
and
yeah.
use those because that's sort of in character.
Are we expecting this? And so this sort of bone palace that she has, are we expecting that to figure? So I said last time, didn't I, that that felt to me like the equivalent of the paradox machine from the Last of the Time Lords. It could be, I suppose, that the Bone Palace has something to do with the way this. So presumably, at some point, the story's going to implode somehow and reset everything back to a version of normality. I don't think you need to do the turning back the clocks thing because I think it's established now in the Doctor Who universe on television that people remember these things. I mean, the whole point of Lucky Day was that aliens are real in our universe, and so you've got this guy who's trying to set up this conspiracy theory to deny it. So I don't think you need to reset time, but you do need to reset the status quo. So I wonder if somehow, somewhere between the TARDIS and the Bone Palace, that's how the status quo gets reset.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna obviously you're going to have some emotional resonance for the people caught up in it, the wider population, because
Well, yeah.
otherwise it's kind of Russell T Davies' Planet Zog thing where it needs to have something to connect the audience to the actual story. Because if it's a second season finale in a row where it's obvious there's going to be a reset button, and there's questions how it's going to get pushed, it's up. Yeah, we've seen that, and that's the third time that Russell T Davies has done that in what's it, however it is, 5 season finales now. So,
I know he does it in every single one, basically, doesn't he? In some ways,
it's just I'm just about the alternate stuff.
yeah.
There's a lot of plotting shortcuts. I think there will be a few plotting shortcuts that people are going to moan about.
Huh.
What about So I'm I'm trying to. So I wrote this down because I've been thinking about how the sort of final episode is set up. So, for instance, remember Last of the Time Lords was 6 months later, was it, or a year later, or whatever it was? Oh, it's 12
It was a
months later,
year because
wasn't it?
it's the
Yeah, yeah.
year of Martha's year or
Year of
whatever. Yeah,
Martha, yeah. And you come back into that, and the setup is the Master's taken over, and she is essentially fomenting a rebellion against him. But the setup is the Master is now in charge, and the Doctor and his companion and the goodies or whatever are the ones in rebellion against the Master. I'm just wondering what the setup for this episode will be. And it's not going to be a 6 months later thing, it's going to be taking place immediately afterwards. But I wondered if the sort of concept around which the episode sort of will revolve. And this goes back to something I said about Lucky Day, because I said in Lucky Day that it felt to me like the real world was infringing on the fantasy of Doctor Who when it came down to that bit where Conrad says to him, "Now you get off my planet," almost as if he's a viewer on a television program saying, "I don't want to watch this fantasy shit. I'm changing channel to watch something else instead." Almost felt like that represented that moment. I wonder if there'll be an element in the last episode where the reality war is actually Conrad's universe versus Omega's universe. And the real universe is the one that kind of breaks through after both the two other things kind of destroy themselves in some way. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of Russell T Davies style concepts on which he could hang the episode.
but I see that ending of Lucky Day as more you cannot you can't get through to a kind of reform vote of that far right one
Oh,
who's absorbed
sure,
too much of that.
that's the
So
literal reading,
yeah,
but I'm thinking the figurative reading is there are certain things that Doctor Who can't address, and Russell
but
T
is
Davies is going out of his way now to address those things.
which is a really interesting way of doing Doctor Who.
Oh, for sure, which is why I wonder if that'll kind of be back next week. Because that was very much to the fore in Lucky Day.
I think so because it's very much pushing the theme of the episode, as we've said, was very much pushing back against this right wing thing. There is going to be, it's going to be fundamentally, the answer is not going to be the underverse. It's going to be maybe what in this universe is the underclass. It's the ones he disregards. That's, I think, going to be the key to this whole episode. That's the wheelchair users, for
Yeah,
instance,
yeah.
that just haven't seen. So it's the bits they're missing that I think will be that key to this episode. But I can't quite figure out how yet.
Well, we'll see. I've got three more fairly quick things, which two of which are going to piss Matt right off, but I'm still going to bring them up. The one that isn't necessarily going to piss him off is the TARDIS. There's that line that the Rani says when she's trying to get the Doctor to Dow, and she says, "Where is your TARDIS?" And a lot of people have made a lot of that. Oh, where's the TARDIS? I don't think necessarily that the where the TARDIS is the important thing. She's bringing up the TARDIS in order to try and cause doubts in his mind. It could just be that the TARDIS is on some street corner somewhere and he becomes repatriated with it when he remembers who he is. And so, whatever. So, it could be that, or it could be that the TARDIS is important in some way. But I don't know. What do you
I
think?
think it's the Bone Palace I said on Saturday.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going with what it was in the Ancestor Cell because
And what it
you
was in
saw the
Last of the
doors
Time Lords.
blowing in. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you saw those blowing in at the end of the Interstellar Song Contest. So there has to be something there.
And
Makes sense.
And the Doctor falling, I suppose, at the end of the last episode will be resolved either by A, this is not the real world, so therefore I can't fall and hurt myself. Or I think maybe more likely B, he does fall, but he falls through the gap and into the other universe, and that's where we pick him up next week,
Or he falls into the TARDIS.
potentially. Right, the two things that are going to piss Matt off, possibly. So one of them is about the Pantheon. And I still think that putting the Pantheon back in the box doesn't get rid of the magic from the Doctor Who universe, but gets rid of this specific. So he's been telling storylines, Russell T Davies, about the god of this, the god of that, the god of the other, much like the Greeks and the Romans and whoever else had the god of this, that, and the other. And I suppose you could carry on doing that forever, but that feels like a definite thing that he's been doing. And at some point, it feels to me like you should stop doing that and tell other stories instead. Because also it feels like we've had about six of those now. How many more do we actually really need before it really becomes apparent that he's just telling the same story over and over? So will he put the Pantheon back in the box? Will there be a moment when sort of Mavity goes back in the box and you get Gravity back? That's the bit that's going to piss Matt off. But you know what I mean? Will there be a point at which the universe is reset to a status quo that we've not been in for the last couple of years while the Pantheon have been around? And actually, just even as I was speaking, the whole Mavity thing, this whole thing is about gravity dragging our universe down into another universe. So the gravity Mavity thing strikes me maybe becomes important because of that. So I don't know. I wonder if some of that will be addressed somehow and the Pantheon somehow go away. What
I
do we
think
think?
the Pantheon will probably get put back in its box, partly because you don't really need it. It's a kind of an
Well, yeah.
excuse for having Lux
Yeah.
and Maestro, and you could have had those before without a Pantheon. You could have had gods in Doctor Who. You just do it. So the Pantheon itself is kind of a very specific thing. It's not an excuse to have these gods. It's a very specific thing that you put to an end, and it doesn't close the door on having, the gods of Ragnarok coming or Fenric coming in or whatever. Mavity, I'm still not, I think the salt at the end of the universe is the key from that episode. I think the Newton
Yeah.
thing and Mavity is just an ongoing kind of, they've changed the timeline joke. They could change it back. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said gravity and oh that,
Oh,
but that would
yeah.
be part of that running joke rather than a key kind of a
It
key
wouldn't
central
surprise me
thing.
if it wouldn't surprise me if these gods have never existed in the first place, and they're all part of the illusion of what's been going on.
Well, this was going to be my other question that might potentially piss Matt off, but it's about the fourth wall breaks. And so I've been wondering if we're going to get an explanation for the fourth wall breaks that's going to have something to do with the story. And it strikes me that even if we don't, there is a reading of this where what we've been watching is Conrad telling the story. And so every time the Rani breaks the fourth wall, is essentially just her walking into the room where Conrad's telling the story
Mm.
in some ways. And so I wonder if that will just be left for us to add up for ourselves, or whether Russell T Davies will address that somehow.
I think Russell T Davis will be aware of the Bobby Ewing situation,
Very much
and
so.
I think it's not impossible, but I think he'd be aware of how dispiriting it can be to reveal that X amount of what you've just experienced is actually a dream slash illusion slash fantasy. So he'd do
Sure.
it very carefully if he was going to do that, because there's a long tradition of.
Well,
I
indeed.
think Magnum had it at one point as well.
Oh,
That you
But
wake up in a
Stephen Moffat did it with Amy Pond, didn't he?
yeah.
So he had the Avatar
Mm.
Amy Pond instead of the real Amy Pond, and we discover halfway through the series that the reason she's been seeing what's she called, Madame Kavarian, breaking through the walls of reality is because actually we're watching the stories from the perspective of Amy in the box controlling the Avatar, rather
Yeah.
than actually watching
Well,
the
I think
stories.
that's an example of somebody doing it very carefully to the
Well, this
point
is
where you don't
yes,
think that you've been watching something fake. You've been watching something real just from a different
yes, for
angle.
sure. But that's what I mean. That's an
Yeah.
example of somebody doing it really carefully.
Yeah.
Stephen Moffat
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Russell T Davies is taking a lot of things from Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall. I just wonder if he will put that part of it in too. And so it doesn't become that the stories we've been watching aren't real. It's just become that the perspective from which we've been watching them wasn't quite the perspective we thought. Literary agent hypothesis. It's we've been watching recreations of the stories rather than the actual stories, but that doesn't mean the stories aren't true. It just means we've seen the recreations rather than the actual thing. And let's be honest, when Stephen Moffat does The Big Bang, he resets the universe so that everything we've seen might have happened, might not have happened. It's a
Yeah.
grey area. And this has become a thing that showrunners do. I just wonder if there's going to be a version of that in next week's, in, the forthcoming episode. Right,
We'll
is
see.
anybody, sorry, Steve?
No, I just said we'll see. We don't
Yeah,
know, do
yeah.
we?
Well, that's a note upon which to pretty much more or less end, maybe, unless anybody's got anything else they want to
Well,
bring up before I do the
there's
spoiler bit at the end.
that's what I was going to say. Don't forget to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Because we want to.
Right. If
Ah,
anybody doesn't want to know what we're going to talk about, turn off this podcast now. You're only going to miss 2 or 3 minutes because we've already done a whole episode on this thing. And so we're basically would just be repeating ourselves if we went over all the same ground again. But there is one specific thing I want to bring up to do with this and to do with the next episode. And so I'm going to bring it up now. And so if you're still listening, you've had your warning, press stop and then I'm going to carry on and talk about. And so the thing that we heard, the thing that everybody's been talking about is that Shooty Cat was leaving. The thing that a lot of people have been saying is, and he filmed his regeneration already. The thing that we've heard or that we saw that was a rumor and that we talked about for an hour is that Billy Piper is going to be his replacement. And so at the end of this episode on Saturday, he's going to regenerate into Billy Piper. We've already spoken about that for an hour the other night or
Russell
whatever it
Tovey
was. Sorry?
or Russell Tovey,
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
Hatcher
Oh
mastermind.
wow, I still think that might be the case.
Well, regardless, what I
Yeah.
want, the reason why I wanted to bring it up again now is not because of who it might be, but
Yeah.
because of what it means for the rest of this episode. So, for the story part of this episode. So, for instance, on one podcast I was listening to today or yesterday, somebody kind of made a suggestion about, oh, I wonder how they'll seed the regeneration in. What will be the sort of things that happen in the episode to cause the regeneration in? And I'm thinking, no, they added this regeneration at the last minute. They went back and filmed a bit of extra stuff to show how the regeneration comes about, right? But they didn't go back to all the sets and all the setups and redo the story at the expense of millions of pounds. They've just shot a little bit of extra stuff in the TARDIS. And so this was kind of what I wanted to bring up. We're not going to watch an episode. I mean, presumably, we're not going to watch an episode that was devised as a regeneration story. We're going to watch an episode that was devised as a season finale onto which a regeneration will have been tagged at the end. So there's not going to be a lot of regeneration stuff. There might be moments. And so that was kind of why I wanted to bring it up. I just didn't.
Because the regeneration might be extra 20 minutes.
Hmm. I don't think so. Shooter Gatwa, from what we can gather, was in Cardiff for maybe a morning or something. He shot maybe 2 minutes worth of stuff.
I was going to
Right.
say, and it hasn't been long enough era to get an end of time part two coda going on.
Okay.
And
But
it's almost a sort of Bad Wolf thing, isn't it? Or Party of the Ways, because they shot
Yeah.
like that regeneration was
Oh, it was
was the direction they were
months
going
after.
in, but they've shot an alternative,
Yeah.
I
so
think,
it could have gone either way.
yeah, yeah.
The Eccleston
Yeah.
regeneration.
I also wonder
Yeah,
with the Eccleston thing, though, we don't know at what point he said, right, I'm not coming back for a second year. But I wonder if it was pretty early because he was
That,
having troubles with them right
that's
from the word go, wasn't he?
that's assuming it was him that said that.
Well, either way, though,
Mm.
I
Ted
think,
didn't film his regeneration till the April, but I don't think that kind of short notice would be viable now, simply because of TV has added so much with effects work, with grading,
Mm.
etc.,
Mm.
that it couldn't
yeah.
just go a month or so beforehand. So
Fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah, so I guess the reason why I brought it up then is just to say don't expect this to be a regeneration story. It'll be a story, I mean, assuming it's right that there's a regeneration, and secondly, assuming it's right that it's Billy Piper, I don't think there'll be hints and seeds leading us there. I think it'll just happen at the end, frankly.
But there wasn't with Jodie's regeneration, was there, at the end of The Power of the Doctor? I mean, it was a story, and then there was a bit of a regeneration on the end of it.
Yeah.
Although it was a story about regeneration. So
Yeah, yeah.
So we're expecting next. So we're expecting the reality war to end with Shooty Gatwa going into the TARDIS and going, "Oh, screw this! I'm off to Hollywood." This this body is getting a little bit too famous.
this body's a little bit too beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
yeah,
dear.
yeah. Oh, do we want to predict his last words then? Is that it?
Yeah,
I think it'd be fuck it, I'm off.
Oh, and after 60 minutes, 70 minutes of managing without a swear,
no,
Steve
Oh,
throws one in
sorry.
at the end.
Sorry.
he'll blow a kiss to the camera, to the audience, just
Oh.
a mwah, just to finish the era off.
Okay. Right. I guess that's it. We'll be back on Saturday then, in the evening at some point. We've all got to watch it live, so this will be a late one, but video and audio on Saturday evening of our review of the Reality War. Until then, I was JR,
I was John.
I was mad.
I was naughty, sweary Steve.
and we will speak again soon.